Amen. All right, you can turn to Joshua chapter 1 again this morning. Joshua chapter number 1. While you're turning, I did remember deacon nominations just for the next few days or so. Today, Wednesday, turn those nomination forms in. It's been stressed to make sure that if you're going to nominate somebody or you would like to nominate somebody, that you ask them first. Make sure that they are willing and able to perform that task. And then those will be handed in anonymously to Pastor Gilbert or slipped under his door, so forth. All right, we're in Joshua chapter number 1. And again, as we've been talking about, as I mentioned earlier, we're kind of going through this series of the difficulties that we face in the Christian life. Hard times that we face, struggles that we might go through, battles that we have to fight. And again, while we're looking at kind of the downside, the valley that we have to walk through at times as a Christian life, we can understand and remember that even as we're walking through the valley, we're not left without a light. We're not left without a companion to be walking with us. We're not left without God's very presence with us as we're going through it, unless we turn ourselves away from him. And so the focus of all of this study and through each lesson that we go through, and even as we started the series, we wanted to make sure that we remember that in all of the difficulties, the battles, the struggles, and everything that we're going through, that it's not about how well you can get through it, but it's really more about who you know as you're going through it. And if you remember who you know, that being God himself, and if you remember that he is traveling with you through whatever the difficulty may be, then you can remember that you can overcome it. You can remember that you can rise above it. You can remember that there is an end to the valley, that as we go through these different things, that we have not just the source of all things, but we do also have a resource in overcoming all of it. So we're in Joshua chapter number 1, and we've been looking for the past couple of weeks at this aspect of the resilient life where we have to face crises at different times. We go through different struggles, again, battles, difficulties. We go through different things where something comes up that we just aren't ready for. Something occurs that is going to wear on us and tax us and frustrate us to no end unless we are going through it with God. And these crises can come in a variety of different ways. It can come through loss. It comes through financial struggles, comes through emotional needs. It comes through all sorts of different things where something just comes up out of seemingly nowhere, and we now have to figure out how to handle this. Those are the crises that we're talking about. And Joshua faced it. They had, and just to briefly review, they had been traveling with Moses for 40 years. He had led them out of Egypt. He'd led them through the wilderness. He had led them up to the very edge of the promised land. And then Israel rejected God's promise of victory. And so he had to lead them for another 40 years into the wilderness. And he was the one that gave them the law. He led them in learning how to worship God. And he taught them all sorts of wonderful things that even still today, that they still revere Moses as as one of, if not their greatest prophet. And now he's dead. And now they have to figure out what's going to happen. Who's going to lead us now? Are we even going to be able to go over to the Jordan to be able to take this promised land? And what's going to happen? And they're facing this time of crisis where they're wondering what's going to happen next. We don't know. Well, in this time of doubt and struggle, God comes to Joshua and he gives him these words. Let's look at Joshua chapter number 1, and we'll read from verses 1 through verse 9. Now, after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, it came to pass that the Lord spake unto Joshua the son of Nun, Moses' minister, saying, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now, therefore, arise, go over this Jordan, thou and all this people, unto the land which I do give to them, even to the children of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot shall tread upon, that have I given unto you, as I said unto Moses. From the wilderness and the Lebanon, and this Lebanon, even unto the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites, and unto the great sea toward the going down of the sun, shall be your coast. There shall not any man be able to stand before thee all the days of thy life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with thee. I will not fail thee, nor forsake thee. Be strong and of a good courage. For unto this people shalt thou divide for an inheritance the land which I swear unto their fathers to give them. Only be thou strong and very courageous, that thou mayest observe to do according to all the law, which Moses my servant commanded thee. Turn not from it to the right hand, nor to the left, that thou mayest prosper whithersoever thou goest. This book of the law shall not depart out of thy mouth, but thou shalt meditate therein day and night, that thou mayest observe to do according to all that is written therein. For then thou shalt make thy way prosperous, and then thou shalt have good success. Have not I commanded thee? Be strong and of a good courage. Be not afraid, neither be thou dismayed. For the Lord thy God is with thee whithersoever thou goest. And as we consider the past couple of weeks, we looked at the first main point, that there's potential in the problem being the death of Moses, but also the potential being that God had already designated and risen up Joshua to be able to be the next leader of the Israelite nation. He was going to lead them across the Jordan. He was going to lead them through battles. And it wasn't that they didn't know who Joshua was. Joshua did have a number of characteristics that had already been proven. We looked at this last week, that he had a proven courage, he had a proven faith, he had a proven humility. And it's an important truth for us to know under that main section, that the potential in the problem, it means that God is already providing an answer to whatever the crisis is that you may be going through, that you may be about to face. Whenever something comes up out of, again, seemingly nowhere, it is absolutely necessary to remember that this didn't come out of nowhere to God. God knew what was going to happen. In fact, it was allowed by God for this to happen. And we, like Job, can respond with faith and praise for what he's done, what he's doing, and what is going to be done as a result of whatever it is that I'm facing now, or whatever it is that just arises up. Whatever it is, I can have faith and trust that God is working this out. And yes, we love to take encouragement from the truth that God is working this out for my good. I say this lovingly. Life is not about our good. God does all these things for his glory. And that's what our life is about. Or that's what it should be about. Now, God does love us, and he does do all things for our good and his glory, but we kind of focus on it in that order, I think, sometimes. It's okay. I know that God's going to work this all out for my good. It's going to be okay. I know that whatever this is, that he's got good in store for me. And that's true. That is absolutely true. And that is a wonderful, loving characteristic about our God and all of his plans and designs, that sometimes we do go through a hard time in order to bring about a greater good. But whenever we start getting our eyes off of ourselves and onto the Lord, then we start to remember and recognize that whatever I'm going through is not about my good. It is a byproduct, a very gracious one. But it's not about my good. It's about his glory. And so, whatever it is, I will praise him, and I will glorify him, and I will magnify his name, because it's all about him, and he's not let this happen except that it be for his glory. And this is where the Israelite people are. It was time for Moses to go and for Joshua now to lead. Again, for their good, but ultimately for his glory. The potential in the problem is that God would be glorified and we would receive blessing as well through it. And then I briefly skimmed in the last couple minutes the second main point. And so we're going to focus more in depth on it today, that there is promise with the opportunity. There's potential in the problem, but there is also promise with the opportunity. In whatever crisis we may face, God does not, again, and I said this last week, God does not call us to white knuckle our way through it, to just grit our teeth and clench our fists and just say, it's okay, I'm going to make it, we're going to make it, we're going to do it. That's not what he's calling us to do. He's given us an amazing resource of his promises and invites us to trust in his ability to carry us through whatever the crisis may be. That there is a reason for what's happening. And there is a good reason for what's happening. I mentioned it, I don't remember when it was, one of the last times I was able to teach before this series, maybe even earlier in the series. But it is God's goodness that enables us to trust him. If God was not a good God, again, he could be an all-powerful God, and he could do whatever he wants. But you can't trust that if he's not good. He can be an all-knowing God and know all that's going to take place and orchestrate it in the way that he wants it to happen. But if he's not good, then you can't trust that it's going to be for good. But when you know that he is good, then you can take a God who's all-powerful and all-knowing and outside of time, and you can know that whatever it is that's taking place, it is for good. Not just mine, his good, his glory. And so we can trust him. And again, whatever the crisis may be. Verses 3 through 5 of our text, God promised to provide for Joshua everything that he was going to need for this conquest, and Joshua and to Israel. He was going to provide him the land, the ultimate victory over his enemies, and God's very presence. And in fact, God has given us promises too. And even as he promised Joshua success, he promised the same to us. Matthew 16:18 says, "And I say also unto thee, that thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it." And anytime I talk about this verse, I always bring this up, because I, for the longest time, viewed this verse incorrectly, right? I thought, the gates of hell are not going to prevail against it. That means that whatever attacks that Satan brings on the church, we're still going to rise up and be victorious. That's not what the gates of hell are. This is not a defensive verse. This is not a verse that the church is just trying to stand and Satan's going to keep buffeting and beating on us and hopefully we just stay rising and God's going to build it and we're going to be unable to be toppled over. That's not what the verse means. This verse is an offensive verse. This is a verse of the church fighting against the gates of hell, breaking them down, tearing them open to bring lost souls out. And let me be clear about that. I'm not saying literally people who have gone to hell can be brought out. I just specify that. But while we are living, the souls who are lost are the possession of Satan and hell. But they can be won and brought out through the power of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And God says here in that verse that if the church will war against the gates of hell, then it will prevail. There is victory. And yet, I'm going to get a little teary over this one because this is me. And yet, whenever the opportunity comes for us to be a witness, we have to muster up some courage to pull out a tract and give it to them. That's not the power and the strength that God gives. Whenever I'm feeling that way, that means that I'm relying on my strength to be able to do that. Whenever I'm afraid to go and knock on somebody's door, whenever somebody's walking by, and I did this as a child, and I even recognized an opportunity the other day that I believe I missed, but I remember as a child, I was walking by with my mom was beside me, and we were walking downtown to somewhere. I have no idea, a bank or something probably. It's really why we went to downtown. But there was a woman who was walking. We were crossing paths. I don't know anything about her. I had no idea anything about her, but I was overwhelmed with this urge to just say something to her, to just be kind, to just say good morning or something. But I still am, a very bashful person, very shy. I'm not one to just put myself out there. I love opportunities like this where I get to teach and I have a foundation that I'm standing upon and I know what I'm talking about. But just, if you want to have a discussion about something with a purpose, I can discuss it. Small talk, I'm terrible at. I am awful at small talk. I am awkward silence. It's just the way it is. And so this But this woman was walking past, and I knew that I needed to say something, and I didn't. And that has stuck with me for, I have no idea how old I was, but it's over probably about 25 years or so. I have remembered that moment. Whenever we rely on our own strength, the promise of victory that God gives here does not apply. But if we rely on God's strength, and if we rely on the one who has called us and the one who has impressed upon us the need, and has given to us the command to go and tell and reach and teach, and we rely on God's strength to do that, the victory will come. At every door? No, not necessarily. But we will see souls saved. We'll see the church grow. So God gives these promises to Joshua and to the people of Israel, and he gives similar promises to us. We'll consider first, he gave them the promise of the land. The promise of the land was really a restating of promises that God had already previously made to Abraham in Genesis 13. Verses 15 through 17 say, "For all the land which thou seest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed forever. And I will make thy seed as the dust of the earth, so that if a man can number the dust of the earth, then shall thy seed also be numbered. Arise, walk through the land in the length of it and in the breadth of it, for I will give it unto thee." And people who know better than I have measured out what the Bible claims to have got, that God was giving to the nation of Israel. And they say that the Israelites only claimed about 10% of the 300,000 square miles that God had promised to them. 10% of God's promise. What of God's promises to us are we only claiming 10% of? He gave him the promise of the land. He said, "You will have it. I will give it to you. The battles you fight, I will win them for you. The land you need to conquer and that you need to harvest, I will provide the rain. I will give you a land flowing with milk and honey, and it will be yours, and you will have peace." And they only claim 10% of this promise. I look at this promise of the land, and for us today, I consider this a big picture promise. This promise of the land was one that would give them hope, right? Because this Israelite nation, these people at this time, had never owned land for themselves. They'd never had a nation for themselves. They never had this kind of possession before. They were a nation without a land. They again had spent years, 400 years, the Israelite people, in slavery in Egypt. And then God brought them out. And he was going to take that generation to give them that land, but they rejected. And so the next generation rose up. So those who had been 20 years of age and younger, they remembered what it was like to have been in Egypt. And they knew what it was like to have been in the wilderness. They had no idea what it was like to actually own anything for themselves. There's a difference whenever you have something that's yours and when you have something or when you don't have anything at all. I was going to say have something somebody else's, but they didn't have anything. They were wandering. But then they were given a promise, a hope that one day the travels will cease. One day the slavery will just be a memory in the past. One day we're going to have something that we can grow our own crops, that we can raise our family, we can have our own home. One day we're going to have this land. There is hope for the future. And it was a big picture kind of hope. And we understand that Christians today, let me say this. We understand also that the land, the promised land that the Israelites were promised, is for us today a picture of a victorious Christian life, right? And we like that. It sounds really nice to make it a picture of heaven. To say, okay, yes, but they had battles to face. They had things to conquer while they were there. That's not heaven. That is this life. That is Christian life. Battles to win, battles to face, but God's strength enables us to win those battles if we have it, if we claim it. But at the end of the battles, there was going to be peace. Now, I say this carefully. We are not ever done with the battles while we're on this earth. but we become stronger. And the battles against us, while they may be bigger, we understand that the one who's fighting the battle for us, he's overcome this one and this one and this one and this one. And we have a series of victories as we're walking in faith with him, as we're having this resilience in this life. We're seeing the series of victories, and we stand upon these victories and we say, whatever comes next, I already know. God's got this. God can take care of this for me. And so the battles, whatever they may be, again, we have the land, we can build up the home, we can build up our peace, but there's going to still be outside forces trying to fight against us. And we say, like Elisha with his servant, and the Syrian army, if I'm remembering correctly, had surrounded about them. And his servant was saying, Elisha, what are we going to do? They're going to attack us. And he just prays, Lord, will you open up his eyes so that he can see? And all of a sudden, the servant looks around and sees the host of heaven surrounding the Syrian army. Or not even surrounding, they were surrounding their place there. They were guarding Elisha and the servant. They were safe there. And he understood that all of a sudden, because what Elisha already knew, what Elisha already had peace about, had been proven through time. But now that, and I'm going to say the servant, I think it was Gehazi, I'm trying to remember. But now the servant can see that what Elisha, I don't know that Elisha could actually see it or not, but I knew that he had faith to see it. But now the servant could. What God had promised, he was going to perform. And God promised to give them a land. They had a hope, a big picture. We have a big picture that we can have a victorious Christian life. We can have that. Are we claiming more than 10% of that? Are we even getting to 10%? I struggle with this. I struggle with this. I know that you struggle with this too. But the struggle is part of the battle. And the battle can be won. There's the promise of the land. We can have a victorious Christian life. And so we get to a little bit, we narrow it down to the smaller picture. We have the promise of the land. We have the promise of victory. So while the promise of the land gives hope, the promise of victory builds faith. God also promised Joshua victory. He said, there shall not any man be able to stand before thee. And that phrase, stand before, has the connotation of blocking or standing in the way of someone. And God was assuring Joshua that no human, let alone an army, was going to be able to keep him from conquering the land. So while they had the big picture, the hope that they were moving forward and into the land to claim to be their possession, they still also knew that there were going to be battles to face. There were going to be enemies to conquer. But God said, not only am I going to give you the land and the big picture, I'm going to take care of all the little battles for you too. All you have to do is follow me. All you have to do is obey me. Meditate in my word day and night, that thou mayest observe to do according to all that is written therein. You do what I've given you to do, and I will take care of the rest. We focus a lot in Christianity in general on the things that you can't do. Don't do this, don't do that, you're not allowed to do this. And when we focus so much on the negatives of what you're not allowed to do, it makes it a very negative thing. But when you focus on the positives of what you get to do, oh, I can't do that because I need to be at church. No. It's not that you can't do that because you need to be at church. You get to go to church to be under the preaching and teaching of God's word. You get to fellowship with other believers of like-mindedness. You get to be in an atmosphere where the very presence of God will come down and lead you into corporate worship. You get to do these things. No, I can't go to the baseball game because no, I can't watch the football game because I've got. Well, if you're going to look at it that way, then that's exactly how you're going to come to church. Saturday mornings. No, I can't do that because I've got to go to SAFE. No, you get an opportunity to fulfill the Great Commission. You get an opportunity to see God come with you as you go door to door, presenting the gospel to different people, inviting people to church. You get to experience ministering with God in such a way. Or, I can't go to the baseball game. I really need to go to this. Pastor's been on me about this. I have no idea. Pastor's probably not been on anybody about this. But whenever we look at it in a negative fashion, it's going to be a negative thing. But when we look at it as it truly is, yeah, no, I'm saying truly, yeah, maybe you shouldn't go to the whatever because you need to go to this. But whenever you do go to this, look at it and see it for what it is. We're going to see the church built. We're going to see victory as we go to, and again, as he says here. And so we look at those positives and we say, God's going to give us the victories. We can say, I can't do this, I can't do that. God's going to give us the victories. And so, well, if I'm obeying the Bible, then I know that I can't do this. If I observe to do according to all that is written therein, yeah, I can't do that, I can't do that. But instead of saying, well, I can't do that, you can also say, well, I don't have to struggle with insecurity because my security is in God. Well, I don't have to struggle with doubt because my faith is in God. Well, I don't have to wonder if I'm going to have food on my table to have for my kids, because why? God said he would supply all of my need. I don't have to, yeah, you don't get to do the sin of the world. Did you hear that? You don't get to do, no. But you also have all the promises that God's given. And you don't have to doubt those things. You don't need to doubt those things. And yet sometimes we still do. Oh, but what am I going to miss out on? Oh, but all my coworkers, they talk about this great new show and it sounds really interesting and I really like to watch it. No. You don't need to. You're not missing out on anything whenever you don't indulge in the world. What you do miss out on is an opportunity to be different when you do indulge in the world. You miss out on an opportunity to be distinctively Christian. That was Tennessee Temple's motto, right? I went there through 11th grade. I never went to the university. But I still remember that much. You miss the opportunity to be distinctively Christian. And so God gives us the promise to have victory. And that means that in the times of crisis, God gives us the victory in all the ways that we need. Peace. That's Philippians 4, 6 through 7. Of direction. You don't have to doubt where to go, when to go. Psalm 32, 8. Strength. Isaiah 40, 31. Provision. Philippians 4, 19. And if you want some of these references afterwards, I can give them to you. Comfort. God gives us comfort. 2 Thessalonians 2, 16 and 17. Grace. 2 Corinthians 9, 8. And so much more. I can't list all the benefits, all the good and perfect gifts that comes down from the Father of lights whenever we trust in him, going through whatever the crises may be. Whatever the battle is that we're facing right now, discouragement, doubt, fear, anxiety, wonder, whatever it is that we may be trying to figure out, God says, I've already provided the answer. If you will trust in me, claim my promises, and move forward in victory. And as you win the victories, you know what? You get the promise of the land as well. And then lastly, and I've kind of focused on it as we've taught through it a little bit already, we have the promise of the land, we have the promise of victories, and then we have the promise of God's presence. 3 times he reassured Joshua, as I was with Moses, so I will be with thee. And you know what? Even later in the same chapter, whenever Joshua receives the word from the Lord and he goes and gives the word of the Lord to the people, you know what they said? They said in verse 17, according as we hearken unto Moses in all things, so will we hearken unto thee. Only the Lord thy God be with thee, as he was with Moses. God's presence makes all the difference. In every crisis, in every struggle, in every battle, it made the difference, and the Israelites knew this personally. I referenced it last week as well. Whenever God brought them to the edge of the promised land the first time, And they doubted. And God said, okay, then you'll spend 40 years wandering. And they said, oh, no. Never mind. We'll go. We'll trust you. We'll do it. He said, no, I'm not going with you. If you go, I'm not going with you. And they went. And they lost. Because God's presence makes all the difference. The next time they went over, they won battle after battle after battle, except for the second one. They lost to Ai, this little know-nothing city. They thought, we don't need to take everybody, just take a few guys. They lost that one because there was sin in the camp. So if we find ourselves in battles, in trying to win, we need to make sure, one, God's presence is with us. Are we fighting this on our own? Or am I really trusting God? Is he giving me the victory, or am I doing this in my own strength? Whew. Didn't know I was going to say that. But that one hit me. I was just talking to Michelle about this last night. Are we fighting the battles on our own, in our own strength, or are we depending on God's? And if we are striving to depend on God's and still finding ourselves losing, we need to ask ourselves, is there sin in the camp? Is there something that I haven't confessed? Is there something that, as much as I'm trying to depend and trust in God, that I've broken fellowship with him over? What is it that I need to bring back to God and lay down? Because those are the only times that we lose, is if we're doing it on our own, or if we're doing it apart from God because of the broken fellowship. We have promises. The Israelites had promises that they were able to claim. The land, the victories, and God's presence. And we have all of the same promises. I am with you always, even unto the end of the world. I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. He promises never to. So whenever we start to miss his presence, we understand it's us that's moved. We have the same promises. Don't be a 10% claimer of God's promises. Claim all of God's promises. Have full faith, full trust. And he will deliver that which he has promised. So as we go through the crises, as we go through the things that just shoot up out of nowhere, like weeds. I hate weeds. I hate weeding, really. I don't care about the weeds themselves. I hate weeding the weeds. When they shoot up out of nowhere, trust in the promises of God. And see that faith build. And as it builds, see the battles, however much greater they may be, become so much smaller because of who you know. Father, thank you for the day that you've given to us again. Thank you for the truth of your word, and thank you for this example of Joshua, these promises that he was given, and the promises that we have, that we can claim if we will have the faith enough to trust you and to obey. Lord, I thank you for all that you've done already. I thank you for the answers to prayer that have already been given. I pray that you would build this church, that we would have faith to obediently go in your strength and see the gates of hell utterly demolished. Thank you, Lord, for all that you've done again. I pray that you be in the service to come. We ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen.